Good evening, everyone. I would like to call this council meeting of June 26th of the Town of Lincoln Council to order. And I would request that we stand for the national anthem.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command.
Car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits.
God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you. Please be seated. I would like to begin by reading a safety notice. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate council chambers to the nearest exit through the chamber doors and obey all instructions given. And if assistance is required, please see the clerk. Madam Clerk, once you have evacuated the building, please gather in the front parking lot outside of Town Hall. At this time, please ensure you have placed your cell phones on silent or are turned off. And lastly, the Town of Lincoln Council meetings are posted on our YouTube channel. Closed captioning is available on all our videos by selecting the closed captioning button on the bottom right of the video. The Town of Lincoln, being part of Niagara Region, is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The regional municipality of Niagara and the Town of Lincoln stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. Members of council are all in attendance, with regrets from Council Russell, and Councillor Pacharivu will be joining us shortly. We also have staff attending both in person and remotely. And also in attendance this evening, we have Regional Councillor Foster. Do members have any additions or amendments to the order of the agenda? There being none, are there any declarations of interest? I see none. Do members have any announcements? Please remember you have a limit of 3 items. I see Councillor Rinchima. Go ahead, Councillor.
Well, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to get my microphone up closer. From the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee, Donna Harrington, our accessibility consultant for the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee, was a guest at a lunch and learn session held by the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce on June 7th. The information was great, but I would say the attendance was a bit sparse, but it's the beginning of what we hope is a continual focus on accessibility for business several times a year. There's lots to learn. To take it a bit further, as we know, things cost money. Discussed during the meeting was some potential funding available to private businesses to make accessibility investments. I've asked for more information on that so I can review what is available. And I've also spoken with staff in community services and economic development here at the town to see if there's a role that we can play to possibly coordinate and assist when it comes to funding opportunities available, because accessibility can be a complicated subject. And while I've said before, Meeting accessibility requirements can be something as simple as painting a door frame to a contrasting color. It could also mean a more significant investment such as renovations or website improvements. And it's not necessarily just about money, but there's the time that it takes to coordinate the required changes. And as we know, sometimes time is money. So looking forward to further discussion on this. And from the Chamber of Commerce, we had a successful golf tournament. Thanks to all that attended. Your support is greatly appreciated. We also look forward to golfing in Mayor Easton's tournament this Wednesday afternoon. And unfortunately, Lindsay Hendricks, who, as you all know, is the Chamber's executive director for, I'm going to say, about 2 years now, has moved on to other employment. She's very bright and she's moving on and up to further her career. We thank her for all that she's done and we wish her the very best. And item number 3, Madam Mayor, Councillor Russell and I had our ward meeting on May the 31st, and it was well attended and discussions were fruitful. Thank you to staff that attended, Melissa Shee, Paul Deaney, Shannon McKay, Dave Graham. Thank you also to Mayor Easton, Councillor Brunet, Councillor Murray, and Regional Councillor Foster for attending and participating. Expect minutes of the meeting to come out to you in the next week or so, but I just wanted to briefly outline for now one of the major topics that came up, and that's the general need for daycare options for families in Lincoln. We had representatives from the Beamsville Early Learning and Childcare Center speaking about the experiences over the last 9 years operating out of the BDSS site, serving over 44 families. We know there's a need for more spaces for daycare, such that expecting parents are reserving spots as soon as they find out they're expecting. To some, the concern is that the school is closing and decisions cannot be made yet as to what will happen with the BDSS site. In the fall, the school board will likely declare the property surplus, and then decisions can be made. And of course, we as a council have not made any final decisions on the potential purchase of the site, but staff is in the process of putting together a business case and a feasibility study on that. I want to thank Paul Deaney, CAO Kirkopoulos, and Mayor Easton for coordinating a meeting with the executive director and program administrator following the ward meeting so that we are able to thoroughly understand the needs. And thank you to staff for offering to assist where we can as they go through the process of preparing for next steps and meeting all the requirements that they have to in order to continue on. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Next on the list is Councillor Timbers. Councillor, could you turn off your microphone, please? Go ahead, Councillor Timbers.
Thank you very much, Mary Easton. It's been a very, very busy month for everyone. The Heritage Committee designated 2 properties. One on Lakeside Drive, the Conrad Tufford home, which was one of the earliest homesteads of pioneer settlers in the area. We also designated a home on Hickson Street, which was the Woodland House, and it was built by David Davis, who was a justice of the peace and also an elected reeve for the town. Oh, at that time, it was the village of Beamsville. So both beautiful properties, and very happy to see some designations happening. We also, on June 15th, the Heritage Committee attended a joint heritage workshop with the Grimsby Heritage Committee, and I want to do a little shout out to Monica Coquiera and Devan Kripp and the heritage planners at the town of Grimsby for organizing and inviting us. It was an excellent, excellent workshop of about 2 hours on presentations, and it was putting information together on designations, learning how to write a designation statement and how to do research. So it was very, very good. It was excellent. So I was very happy to attend that. And my my third, I've lumped it a few together because there were just so many things. I tried to pick 3. We had lots of grand openings and ribbon cuttings. The new winery on King and Victoria, Provisions Food Company, we were there for a tour, Dorkin Systems, and Vineland Growers opening. So thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brunet.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On June 11th, I attended the TAPMO Executive Committee meeting. Some items on the agenda were consideration on a proposal for government relations as well as communications for the TAPMO board moving forward. We reviewed the job description for the position of a proposed executive director for TAPMO. As currently there hasn't been an ED, as Madam Mayor is fully aware, after sitting on the TAPMO board for a number of years, as well as speaking with regards to delegations for the upcoming AMO convention in August. Further discussion regarding excess soils and fill trucks and how we can work with the OSSGA, the Ontario Stone and Sand and Gravel Association, and municipalities across Ontario took place. Next steps for our next meeting to concentrate on legislative changes to the CBOR enforcement and work towards excess soil brought into existing pits with better understanding of how soils are classified and better education on soil quality within municipalities. I also attended the MIRI conference from June 13th to the 16th in Muskoka as a board member for the NPI Energy, along with approximately 47 other local electricity utilities in Ontario, to talk about the future of electricity in Ontario, the impact of EV charging stations, and the impact it will have on the grid over the next 12 years to 2035, and the cost of infrastructure upgrades that will be required by municipalities to meet all changes that we're facing. Just as an aside, I won't mention the particular utility, but one of the CEOs stood up and said in their space, in their geographic area where they serve their electric LDC, they're looking at $3 billion. That's a B, not an M. $3 billion in infrastructure upgrades over the next 20 years. Think about that for a minute. Great panel discussions as well as workshops on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace took place. And I just wanted to echo Councillor Timmer's discussions about all the different things that we attended last week with the business tours, but specifically want to congratulate Vineland Growers on just a marvelous grand opening, celebrating 113 years. And I don't think there was a farmer within 200 miles of here that wasn't there. And congratulations to Mike Eckert and Chair Trigano for just a marvelous open house. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Murray.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to share that Councillor Miklik and I were pleased to host a town hall meeting on June 12th for Ward 3. It was an excellent opportunity to hear directly from our ward residents on the challenges and concerns that they're seeing in our community, as well as feedback on some of the ongoing projects. On behalf of myself and Councillor Miklik, I'd like to extend my thanks to the residents who came out, as well as to our senior staff who were invaluable in providing additional information and answering questions. And I really appreciate that they were willing to take an evening out to work with us, with our residents. So thank you very much. I also wanted to share that I was an attendee at the Ontario Wine Awards earlier in the month, and it was very exciting to see a number of Lincoln wineries who were recipients of prizes, gold awards and bronze and silver as well. And I just want to extend my congratulations to these award-winning excellent wineries, which included King and Victoria, Fielding Estates, and 180 Wineries. And just wonderful to see the exemplary product that's coming out of our community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, councillors. Some very substantial work has been going on over the last month, no question about it. And thank you all for your attendance. There's certainly a number of other things. I'm not going to repeat the ones that you've already mentioned, but there are other things that we can talk about as well. And I'll certainly be happy to chime in and add those comments. And I really believe that when I use the word substantive, I'm talking about important tasks that have a longevity to them and require a lot of input. And I'm really glad that Lincoln is involved in these matters. We have no proclamations this evening. We have no recognition and achievements. We have one delegation this evening, being Regional Councillor Foster, with an update report. Come ahead, Councillor Foster. We've moved Councillor Foster up so that he doesn't have to get old waiting for us to get through the agenda.
Older.
So Madam Clerk kindly moved him on under delegations, and although we may find that he might stay around tonight as there's a couple of reports from the region, so we'll see. That will be up to him. So Councillor Foster, happy to have you here, and seems that I've seen you every day for the last 3 or 4 days.
It's
so-
we're kind of joined at the hip, I guess, if
At
you
the
want to put
moment.
it that way. Yeah, and thank you very much for changing it around a little bit, your schedule. And I will, as I said, I endeavor to be here as often as I can. And you know, this will be helpful to me as well. And I do appreciate you guys do have 2 region reports that are coming up a bit later. So I think I'll stick around and listen to the discussion that's going to go on with that. A couple of things, listening to your announcements earlier. So Councillor Njima was right. The big issue at the Ward 1 meeting was daycare that came in and through. And one of the things that I undertook at that point was to also talk to staff at the region immediately on that one. The big problem is going to be red tape as we start moving through all of these processes with the daycare here in town. And so I'm hoping, and I was making some very strong suggestions at the Public Health Committee and to the Commissioner, that this is going to be a problem in the community, and the stats show it quite dramatically. There really aren't spaces available here in town. So anyway, I'm hoping regional staff are going to be able to help us as we go through that as well. And I do apologize to Councillor Murray and Mikulik for missing their meeting. I took a vacation day, so I'm sorry about that. I'll be at your next one. So I was very pleased to attend quite a variety of events over the last couple of weeks as well. And I first want to say I really do appreciate Director Deani and CEO Kokopoulos. They're very good at reminding me when these events are coming along, and so it's actually really good to do some of the outreach that I get to do within the events as well. And I'll give you an example of it. So I was at the ribbon cutting along with everyone else, or for most of council, at the Dorkin facility in the industrial area, which I had not had an opportunity to visit that plant before. I had a discussion with Marcus, the president, as it was going on, and so I've actually arranged another meeting with the economic development, George Spezza from the region, as well as Mr. Deani, to talk about a few things that they do have some concerns about. So anyway, it's good to get into these things and have these discussions with these people so that you have a much better view of what it is that they're doing, what they're thinking, and how we can be of value as a municipality here and also as a region for these people. Provisions was a real interesting event. And the mayor and I were at the official ribbon cuttings for the new facility at Vine Research. I know most of you as council members were there for sort of a pre-open house back before that. But the official ribbon cutting, I got to stand back and watch all the muckety mucks cut the ribbons as well. But it was definitely worthwhile, and had a good opportunity to have discussions with the minister as well as Mr. Oosterhoff, who was at that. And the Vineland growers, I totally agree with the commentary on that. That was an amazing event. Unfortunately, I had to leave early. I had some commitments with AMO that I had to start dealing with Thursday evening, but amazing facility, to say the least. A top-notch organization all the way around. The other thing that we were doing, the mayor and I and Councillor Murray, and who else? Who was the other councillor? Oh, Councillor Patriva. We were at the Grape and Wine event that went on yesterday down at Charles Daly Park. And I just want to give kudos back to staff on that one. An amazing job by the group there. Brittany in particular, but I mean, everyone that was involved with that to make that happen. An amazing day at Charles Daly Park. So as I said last Thursday, I was at the AMO meeting Thursday night and Friday. And I gave in my notes to you just some of the things that we talk about at AMO. And it's not to sort of get into a full-fledged discussion of them tonight, but just to give you a flavor of what AMO really does and what we're talking about within these. So for instance, MPAC, the MPAC president, as well as the chief operating officer, came in and had a very good discussion on what's happening with MPAC. They have changed completely their systems. They have probably one of the most comprehensive databases anywhere in the world when it comes to properties that they're looking at. They actually have technologies now that they're selling around the world to other organizations to go and do the exact same type of thing when it comes to property taxes. Good discussion about the fact that MPAC doesn't make the decisions. It's the provincial government that makes the decisions on when and how values are going to be assigned. So just to let everyone know, we're still sitting at 2016 values for properties. That's going to change someday. We'll see when the provincial government decides to do that. And I think we as a group, yourselves in this council at the region as well, are going to have a good discussion, because, you know, it isn't necessarily the sky is falling when this happens, but everybody has to understand what the real ramification is when it comes to these changes. Blue box transition. Major issue right across the province, particularly on timings, particularly on how these things are coming into effect. I was at the Waste Management Steering Committee this morning at Niagara Region. We had a good discussion on this because an awful lot of the current recycling is not recognized within the provincial responsibilities. And so this is going to be a big problem for us in Niagara Region. Do we continue with the same level of service on recycling that we have had going? How much are we going to be spending on that, considering the provincial government has said, no, it's producer responsibility? What about Niagara Region itself? It produces all sorts of stuff. And so they're a net producer of things as well. So how is that going to affect the taxpayers as we go on? So lots of ramifications going into play with the entire Blue Box program. Mayor Easton is aware of the proposed responses to combine PPS and Place to Grow, the growth plan that AMO is working on. The task force that she belongs to is going to be continuing to do some work in that particular area. Suffice it to say that lots of concerns coming up, but you know, AMO is working its way through those particular areas. There's one I wasn't aware of. Perhaps Mr. Bruder and some of them are, but there's things in and around locate consultation and fees that are going to be charged, or at least a discussion about fees and locates and those types of things. It's a big issue. I mean, and there's lots of concern right across the province. As you saw, I provided the stats of what comes into AMO, and that was a huge one. There are many small municipalities in and across Ontario are very, very concerned about fees that are going to be coming into place with that. Public Sector Broadband Network Innovation Alliance. That's all about when Rogers went down and cut off credit cards in and across the province. There are changes that are going into play, and municipalities are joining together to make sure that those things are taken care of. Big one for here at Lincoln Council, as well as Niagara Region, a report on municipal insurance costs, particularly in and around cyber. What's going to end up happening with that? LAS, which is a part of AMO, is going to be looking at providing cyber insurance back in and through. That's coming. There should be all sorts of announcements when we get to the AMO conference in August. Homelessness, major issue. There was an update that we went through with that. And Bill C5, the fact that that was killed, AMO still has their report that has gone forward, basically outlining how AMO feels that we should be looking at changes in and around code of conduct. The other thing that I wanted to mention tonight, and Mayor Easton and Mr. Kokopoulos and I were made aware of it this afternoon by the Director of Transportation at Niagara Region, but and this will be actually good news for us here. They're going to be issuing the formal notice of commencements for the terms of reference for the Niagara Escarpment Crossing individual environmental assessment. That's all being floated out this week, being officially announced within the newspapers and with the various communications that are going to go into play. The project will be examining options for a north-south transportation connection between the QEW and a potential future regional road 20 bypass of Smithville that is able to accommodate commercial vehicles and other transportation modes in order to provide greater safety for local communities. So that's the premise and start of that. Awful lot of work is going to go into play with this over the course of the next couple of years. But anyway, we're in a starting mode, which is great. So, and with that, you'll be seeing that officially coming from your staff later on this week. That's my report for this evening. Thank you, Mayor Easton.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And now questions from council members.
It looks like I'm going to get off easy this
I
evening.
think you did such a thorough job.
That's because Councillor Pat Dreve isn't here. So, oh, he is? Oh, darn. No.
Thank you very much, Councillor. There's certainly a few items that are a bit mysterious, including the one on Bill 5.
Yeah.
I did a little bit more reading on that, and the question that I would have for you is whether or not there's been any discussion at AMO regarding what Minister Clark is planning to bring forward as in one of the readings that I was looking at. He apparently was going to bring forward his own bill. That was the word that was used. Did you hear anything further about that?
No, I have not heard that he's planning on doing that. In fact, it's been almost the exact opposite on the AMO side of things. The government pretty much went silent on this, and it was being pushed by the opposition. And so that's one of the reasons why I believe that particular piece of legislation was killed. There was a number of reasons for it. I have actually reached out to our MPP, Mr. Oosterhoff, and the plan is to sit down with him and have a discussion on this as well. But the AMO stance has not changed. Egregious, whatever the definitions are going to be, should not be left into the hands of a municipal council, be it region, be it the town of Lincoln, because these types of things can become weapons if used incorrectly. But it's a belief that if it gets to a certain stage, there needs to be judicial review and potentially losing seats if the situation is appropriate. So, and I'll dust off that report for everyone and send it over again. That was over a year ago now, if I'm not mistaken, when it was originally put out. So
it's surprising because it had almost 100%, if not 100% support in 2021 when it was first brought forward. But
absolutely,
of course, politics being what it is, this is a pretty serious issue. There are a lot of nuances that are assigned to this, to the entire Integrity Commission discussions. Harassment is now tied, and I'm going to ask the CAO to clarify this, but it's my understanding that the harassment policies that exist within municipal corporations now cover, they not only cover the staff, but they also cover the counselors as well. Mr. Kirkopoulos, could you speak to that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Foster and to all members of council. Both, I mean, there's definitely two different policies that apply, one to council, one to staff, but both do include, you're correct, Madam Mayor, provisions around harassment, both to council as well as to staff. We can definitely share those with members of council again, just so that you're familiar in relation to the conversation on Bill 5.
And maybe at the same time, and I'm just adding this in because a few months ago, and I've forgotten when it was, but there was certainly a movement to stop us from communicating with staff after hours and on the weekends outside of working hours. And of course, that was that's a big change for us because our staff have been pretty generous with us. But I see that that's part and parcel and meant to be included in there in order that staff do have a break from the working environment. But sometimes the pressure is pretty great when it's not really necessary.
It's very interesting, the thinking with that. Having come from the private sector, and doing an awful lot of work within that, I had huge expectations of me within the job roles that I had. And so I guess it depends on how the job descriptions are developed and the expectation in and around it. And this whole future bill or whatever, one of the things that was pointed out to us at AMO is that the egregious situations that had been talked about and used as the examples why we should be changing, every one of them lost in the last election. So I think the public also is not willing to stand for councillors and mayors or whatever it happens to be deciding they're going to be flouting what it is that they're doing within those roles. So anyway, it was just a very interesting fact that came up when it was all said and done.
Interesting. Thank you very much, Councillor Foster, and thanks for attending this evening. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, good to see you, Councillor Pachariva. I think you need to put your, I think you're on mute, maybe. Are you on mute? We can't hear you.
I guess I can make a comment about a better meeting, but
We'll have, Councillor Pachariva will have IT connect remote with you to see what's going on there and we can come back.
If you'd attended in person, we wouldn't have this problem. I think that's probably its own form of harassment. Confirmed by the CAO.
anyway,
Okay,
I do appreciate the fact that this council does give me the opportunity to talk about the issues going on with Niagara region, and all of you know, and all of you do take advantage of the fact that I am pretty good at returning messages as well as we get into these things. So and by the way, there was a bit of a fallout from your meeting in Ward 3. I did have a couple of people contact me about issues in and around transportation, and that was a good thing. So I was able to get them to talk to the right people and get them in the right direction. So anyway, thank you very much.
thank you very much. Councillor Pachariva, how's it going?
Does it work now?
There we go.
Yes,
Yes.
we hear you.
Fantastic, Steve. Thank you. You are a wizard, my friend. Rob, thank you very much for coming tonight. And question, you had mentioned about the environmental assessment on the escarpment crossing.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on is there some preconceived notions? Because last week at the intersection of 30 Road and King Street, these signs kept popping up. Region Grimsby, hands off 30, use Bartlett. So are they confusing the environment or the work that the region is doing with respect to highway King Street, the utility relocates and the rebuild of that, with a possible use of 30 Road as an escarpment crossing?
through you, Mayor Easton, I have no clue why they have those signs up. We've been very, at least I can say I've been very consistent. I've worked with Councillor Bernay and yourself to address issues in and around that road, and as well as Mountain View as well. So I really don't know where it's coming from, Councillor Pachariva. I think perhaps active imaginations, but reality is that this environmental assessment, again, you know, it's all going to be laid out, and you guys can have a good discussion about it when it's all officially announced and where it's going. But I do not believe there's a preconceived notion that Bartlett going up Park Road up to Smithville is the solution of choice. That might be much to the chagrin of this council, but I would suggest to you that that's not written in stone. So we need to take a look at what they're doing, how they're doing it, and what the eventual goal is going to be out of this environmental assessment that's coming into play. But it will be a comprehensive environmental assessment, and that's what's really needed. So.
Okay, and through you, your worship, yeah, because I mean, for the last number of years, at AMO, we've been delegating the town of Lincoln, the town of Grimsby, the township of West Lincoln, along with the region, on getting the Bartlett Road extension, because it would open up not only West Lincoln's industrial park, but also ours. And there's the interchange at the QEW already constructed. So, I mean, if they're going to take a fulsome look at it from Grimsby to the town of Lincoln border, then I guess we'll have to wait and see what's the outcome. So, a little disappointed in that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I really don't know where this assessment is going to go, Councillor Pachariva. I think it just is going to be interesting as we go and move along. The one thing that's been consistent that I've been hearing back from the province is that the amount of money that's being discussed to do this is not insignificant. And we have some awfully big major projects that are going on in Niagara right now. Singularly, the wastewater treatment plant in Niagara Falls South is the biggest project that we've ever done at Niagara region. And it needs to be done for the South Niagara Hospital. So like there's pieces of the puzzle like that are going into play. You know, and whether it makes sense to be spending I'll throw out numbers, like who the heck knows where these costs are going to go to these days. But, you know, between 400 and 600 million to go and build an escarpment crossing, we're going to have a pretty good case. We're going to have have all of the environmental assessments properly done. And we're going to have the entire region locked on this to make sure that it's done appropriately. So a lot of work to do, as I said, before we're actually at that stage. So.
Thanks very much, Councillor. Thank you, Councillor Foster.
Okay, thank you.
Councillors, the next part of the agenda, starting with oh, I'm sorry. I do have a motion. Just a moment here. I have a motion moved by Councillor Murray and seconded by Councillor Timmers. The council receive and file for information the following delegations. Regional Councillor Foster. Madam Clerk, would you please call out the vote?
And the vote is now open. And I will close that vote. And that carries.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. The motion is carried, and we move on to item 11, which is items for consideration. And we have 6 items that have been brought forward for consideration this evening. Our first item is from the Council Information Package week ending June the 9th, 2023, from the town of Fort Erie regarding the maintenance of the Fort Erie Urgent Care Center hours of operation. And that would be on page 5 of the agenda package. Counselor Timmers, I would appreciate it if you would take the chair for a few moments and I'll present this motion. Thank you, Counselor. Yeah.
Thank you, Mary Easton. Go ahead.
Madam Clerk, could you put the motion up on the screen, please? Councillors, there's been some repeated situations within the town of Fort Erie in regard to the staffing levels at their urgent care center. And these are the direct result of issues around recruitment of physicians in particular. And on 2 occasions that I'm aware of, staff have been redirected to the St. Catharines Emergency Department, which in itself is logical from a triage perspective and also where you need to have the greatest amount of expertise. However, as communities within the region of Niagara, we need to be concerned about the repetitive nature of this. And I have a motion that has been seconded by Councillor Brunet. Thank you, Councillor Brunet. And which supports the position of the town of Fort Erie.
Madam Mayor, we're just working to get the agenda item up on the screen.
Okay. I have the content of it. It's not a very long motion. I'll read it. And if it's Madam Acting Chair, if it requires something more, then we can take the time to do that. That council supports a resolution within the correspondence received re the maintenance of Fort Erie Urgent Care Center hours of operation. And whereas the town of Lincoln Council received a resolution from the town of Fort Erie calling on the province to maintain the hours of operation of the urgent care center in the town of Fort Erie and at any point in time in the city of Port Colborne. And I would just clarify that Fort Erie and Port Colborne are negotiating with the province on what kind of coverage is going to exist in both of their communities. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the province take action to protect and maintain hospital services in the region of Niagara, thereby ensuring that local primary care through urgent care centers are not limited in service delivery as a result of staff being redirected in their scheduled rotations to emergency departments. In this way, services across the region will be well balanced through continued strong staff recruitment efforts. And further, that in order to maintain hospital emergency services and urgent care services, that the Council of the Town of Lincoln support the motion of the Town of Fort Erie. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mary Easton. So I'm going to ask if members have any questions to this motion. And I'm not seeing any mics on. No hands up. Okay, so I will ask our clerk to open the vote.
Thanks, Councillor Timmers. And the vote is now open. And I will close that vote. And that carries.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mary Easton, I'll just continue. Our next item for consideration is from the council information package, week ending June 9th, 2023, from the municipality of Mississippi Mills regarding oath of office. And Mary Easton, did you want to speak to this item?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I wanted to ensure that everyone had had an opportunity to read this, and because this is going to be future legislation, and I've asked CAO Mike Kirkopoulos, he would add any comments to this. There's no action for us to take tonight. It's really for our awareness and knowledge only.
Go ahead, CAO.
Through you, Madam Deputy Mayor, to the Mayor. In reviewing this particular motion and the support of this motion, I mean, definitely something that would be handled by senior levels of government. So any endorsement or support in no way, I think, inhibits where the province or the federal government may be going and making any of these changes. So I would, I think, suggest to members of council, if you do decide to support it, it is simply that, and those decisions, I think, are being contemplated beyond just Lincoln. And I think that's why this motion from this particular municipality was brought forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. CAO. Do members of committee or council have any questions regarding this motion? Councillor Bernay?
Thank you, Chair Timmers. So just wanted to clarify, this is with regards to reducing municipal insurance costs? Is this the one we're talking about now? Or am I ahead on the
This is the oath of office. So-
oath of office?
yes.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Bernay, I think that one's coming up, so.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see any other mics. Okay, so I have a motion moved by Mayor Easton, seconded by Councillor Murray, that council supports the resolution within the correspondence received oath of office. Madam Clerk, can you please open the vote?
Thanks, Councillor Timmers, and the vote is now open. And I will close that. And that carries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Timmers. We'll move on then to the next item, which is just one moment. This is a motion from the town of Plimpton, Wyoming, and it's a resolution regarding reducing municipal insurance costs. And again, we haven't spoken about insurance. I believe we spoke briefly about it during the budget process, but I've asked the CAO to address this briefly, and then if there's any questions. Mr. CAO.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to members of council. Again, this is one of those motions that I think you're seeing a number of municipalities as they look at the various budget challenges, try to build support across the province to somehow advocate to the industry for premium increases that aren't what we're typically seeing. I think council will recall our year-over-year increase from 20 to 21, and then 21 to 22 has been in the approximate 15% range. And I think we can see increases in the future, at least from what we're being told. And I'll look to Charlotte to correct me if I'm wrong, again, in that 10 to 25% range. So as you can see, year over year, if we're seeing increases like that, they do become challenging for municipalities. And so I think, again, this particular municipality that brought this forward is just seeking support to collectively advocate to the industry.
Very much, Mr. CAO. Now, Councillor Brunet, do you still have a question? Sure. Go ahead, Councillor Brunet.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So yeah, I think it's great that we endorse this motion from this municipality, but I guess I would just ask, you know, we continue to hear about shared services. We continue to hear about you know, what the province expects of us as municipalities. So I'm just wondering through you, Madam Mayor, if the CAO could just elaborate as to whether he's hearing around his meetings of CAOs in the Niagara region. Is this an opportunity for us to be looking at bundling? And we talk about procurement and working together with municipalities on ways of saving money. To me, this seems like a tee it up and hit it down the fairway.
Thanks, Counselor. Go ahead, Mr. CEO.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Councilor Bernier is absolutely correct. It is one of those issues that's come up, especially when we look at procurement. I'd suggest legal services is also another one of those particular items that we've talked about. So yeah, absolutely. The councilor's right. We should be teeing this one up and doing it collectively. And we should be doing more of that. And so I suspect, things like this are coming. There does appear at times to be a little bit of a reluctance to do some things together, but this should be an easy one. And definitely from the perspective of this council, I know council's passed the motion officially on the record for us to look at shared services. And I have shared that with other municipalities and CAOs across the region. So my hope is in relatively short order that we'll be doing more of this together.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Reimer and seconded by Councillor Timmers. The council supports a resolution within the correspondence received reducing municipal insurance costs. Madam Clerk, would you please call out the vote?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The vote is now open. And I will close that vote. And that carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion is carried. Our next item for consideration is from the Council Information Package week ending June 9th, 2023, from the Municipality of Mississippi Mills regarding school bus stop arm camera. Again, because these are of a general nature, we haven't talked about this ourselves. I've asked the CEO to provide any information that he may have at his disposal on this matter. Mr. CEO.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll look to Director Graham if he's got anything to offer in terms of this particular motion or the offer of support. Again, I think, as we talk safety, as we talk speeding, especially on corridors and arteries within our community where school buses are often traveling, as we talk about school safety zones. I think when this motion did come forward, this was again one that you, Mayor Easton, were interested in supporting. And so I think from the perspective of staff, anything we can do to make our roads safe, anything we can do to make our community safety zones safe, absolutely are things that we can lend our voices to. In terms of where the province goes and decides to mandate or not mandate cameras, I do hear it as one of those things that is gaining some momentum across the province. But staff can, potentially follow up and inquire as to that. But in terms of any additional information, I don't at this time unless Director Graham does.
Please go ahead, Director Graham.
Thank you through you, Madam Mayor, and I think our CAO made a lot of good points. This is definitely something that we would support from staff's perspective in looking at increasing safety in our community. We have a lot of school buses within Lincoln, so I can definitely find out more about this, but definitely in support of it.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm sure we've all seen the violations as we're driving down the roads, and we've certainly heard about them. I have any questions? None. I have a motion moved by Councillor. Oh, okay. Just a moment. Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you very much, Mayor Easton. Through you to staff. I'm just curious. I believe that stop arm cameras are already allowed to be on school buses currently at a municipality's will or desire. And I'm looking at this motion. I'm wondering, is this a motion that if one of us councillors had brought forward to staff, would staff have worked on this motion and worded it in such a way where the motion states that the municipality is just telling the province that they're going to pay for it, and they're going to require it. Like that's what the motion I'm reading is that require all school buses to have stop arm cameras installed and paid for by the province at the start of the 2023-24. And also take care of all the ongoing costs. Is this something that we would, is this a type of motion that we would script and submit and consider?
Counselor, just we'll certainly see what the CAO has to say. However, there's a reference here, I think on the first page, that refers to just that they passed the Safer School Zones Act. It authorized the use of the automatic school bus arm camera. But then it goes on to talk about the financial costs. And so they're turning it back to the province and saying, you need to do this. Require all school buses to have the stop arm cameras installed and paid for by the province.
That's what I'm reading, but
Yes.
like the question I'm asking is this
Is this a format
this
that we would take?
correct? Is this a motion that we would script the way it is to say that, you know, we're just basically telling the province that this is what we are expecting and you're going to pay for it?
Okay, Mr. CAO.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor's question, I think, anytime we see motions from other municipalities, would I suggest that we would write them exactly the same? Probably not, councillor. I think you're correct in that the legislation is passed right now. Municipalities can request those of school bus providers within our community and then cover the costs of it. I think what this municipality is looking at is that becomes cost prohibitive when you look at a number of school buses. And you look at the potential costs of that depending on the size of the municipality. And so the advocacy that they're doing in reading the motion is that it become mandated across the province, not on a voluntary basis, but on a thou must have basis, and then that be covered at a provincial level versus downloaded to municipalities. So, I think to your question, would I write it exactly the same? Maybe not. But in looking at it, I think, do we, from a staff perspective, have any huge concerns? No, I wouldn't say we have any concerns with that.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get to, because like it's pretty strong wording. I just think it's pretty strong wording, and I think that they are very beneficial, and I do agree with them that they should be on school buses and that fines should be handed out. But I think it's also a pretty complicated subject when it comes to enforcement, fines, the collection, the administration of the fines. And it seems to me like a rather simple motion, but sometimes simple motions, that's all you need. So those are the points I was bringing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor. So I don't have really a specific question, but I just think it is timely. Not specifically, the camera arms of the school bus, but just at our last meeting, we did direct staff to reach out to the region as well as NRP and the school board, St. Mark's, to look at the community safety zone on Mountain Street. I remember when Councillor Patrieva and I were involved in launching active transportation a number of years ago. Doesn't seem that long ago, but I guess it's been 6 or 7 years. We had the opportunity to go out on Ontario Street, where we walked the whole area with the principal of Senator Gibson School, with the busing, the school bus system, and crossing guards. And we heard from a number of people in front of the region personnel that were there, that the school crossings on Ontario Street we're witnessing on a regular basis, people just driving right past the school buses, with their stop signs out. And this was happening in a regular area. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there was an autistic child that was living in the area. So there was some grave concerns going back to there. So I really do think this is appropriate. I think it's long overdue that we we really look at those community safety zones and make sure that our children are safe and looked after in our community. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Counselor. I'm also noting on the fourth whereas, and we've seen this repeatedly in reference to police resources. They certainly can't be everywhere at all times, but I think your point about public safety certainly overrides the strong language. Counselor Pachariva.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. A number of us sat in on a presentation at AMO a few years ago about these stop arm cameras and you know, the ability for the police actually to go to the offending party's house and lay a charge is paramount. So anything we can do to expedite this, I'm all in on. So thank you very much for bringing this forward. And I think this is perfect. And like Councilor Brunet, it's a hand in glove support. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Counselor. And Madam Clerk, there are no other questions? Would you please call the vote?
And we'll just get that put up on the screen, and the vote is now open for council. Thank you. And I will close that vote, and that carries, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk, and the motion is carried. Our last two items are from the council information package, the week ending June 16th, 2023. And the first the first report is dated June 29th, 2023, the Niagara region regarding 2022 reserve water and wastewater treatment capacities. I've asked that this be put on the agenda so we could have a public discussion about it to ensure that it's well known across our municipality that there is considerable effort that goes into the municipal evaluation of reserves around water and wastewater capacities as it relates to new development proposals and related future capacity. So I'm going to ask Mr. CAO to speak to the report or whoever he designates. And then if we have any questions of our regional councillor, we'll take a quick vote and have him set up as an additional delegation. Please go ahead, Mr. CAO.
Through you, Madam Mayor, you know, and I'll look to other members of the team, specifically directors Graham, Bruder, and or Tunikaitis to chime in if I've missed anything as it relates specifically to this particular item. I think what the region is doing here it is prudent. I think it's what we all do as municipalities, looking at our assets, looking at growth projections, and looking at, you know, the particular allocation of what pays for what. And I'm probably oversimplifying that, but at the end of the day, I think when we look at allocations and we're going through this exercise, when we look at various developments and the timing of those developments, we look at costs, we look at the need for expansion. I think of a number of projects both on the Ontario Street side of life, but also when we look at Prudhome's and the expansion there with various developers and the existing community, how that's a portion, and do we have enough within our reserve funds, and are we collecting enough? A number of municipalities are going to be going through DC bylaw updates and the particular studies that go into that. There's some changing legislation within Bill 23 that's also going to determine what those allocations will be and what we're able to collect. So again, I think, you know, supporting or bringing attention to this particular report and update that the region sent through is prudent and appropriate, but I look to other members of the team if there's anything they want to chime in on.
Please go ahead, Director Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I think this is a great example of how, you know, the region and the town are collaborating and planning ahead for development. When you look at this report, you know, we want to make sure our treatment plants, wastewater treatment plants and our water treatment plants we'll be able to provide enough capacity for the town as it grows, looking out into the long-term 2051 and beyond. So there is a lot of work that goes into this. Also the master servicing work that kind of supports all this behind the scenes as well. So I think it's just good that this information does come forward and, you know, council can see that there's a lot of planning happening behind the scenes servicing wise to ensure that we can accommodate growth in the future.
And thank you very much, Director. And on the second item, it's dated May 30th, 2023 from the Niagara region regarding highlights from the 2021 census of population. Mr. CAO, if you have any introductory comments, and then I'll look to Mr. Bruder to speak to this matter.
Through you, Madam Mayor, specifically to this one, I think, you know, we often, you know, and I'll talk about Lincoln specifically, and then maybe just about the census and how we use it to look at future estimates in the work we do. I think we're often, and I've heard this in meetings, definitely in ward meetings, we're often talking about Lincoln's an older community, or it's this type of community. I think when you look at census data and data in particular, I think that's what we need to guide our decision making on, not one's assumption or one's inference that we're this or we're that. And I would tell you, I think if you look at the census data, we're a community that is not as old as maybe we think we are, that is seeing a lot more youth, is seeing a lot more immigration, is seeing a lot of different things come into our community. And I think when staff look at it, for us, it's a good telltale sign of things we just need to anticipate, whether it be future programming, the type of programming. I think about some of the things that Director McKay and her team provide, whether it be pickleball and how we've seen that increase versus other sports, just things that we're continuing to monitor. And, you know, it looks at things around housing and the provision of housing. And I know Matt's going to talk about that. Again, we often talk about the type of housing, diversified housing stock in our community. If you look at the data, and I'm going off memory, but 3/4 of the housing stock in our community is single family homes. And I think, again, when we look at affordability, when we look at all those things that we talk about and we set as important elements of our strategic plans, we need to look at the data and actually use the data to make decisions. And so if you see a different built form that may be a little bit different for people, maybe a little bit more foreign for people and pushback, it is not because it's a cheaper to built form, but it's a built form we don't have in the community. So again, I think both Director Bruder and I, when we were looking at this, kind of came to the same realization. So some good information, some information we should figure out how to communicate more broadly. But, you know, I know Matt's wanting to chime in on this as well.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Mr. Bruder.
Thank you. And through you, Your Worship. Yeah, not a whole lot to add. Mike covered a lot of the things very well that I was going to speak to. You know, when he mentioned the housing stock, the existing housing stock and the amount of singles specifically, what jumped out at me was not just that number, you know, the approximately 3/4 of the residential units being single detached, but comparatively speaking in Ontario, the rest of Ontario is down around 59%. So it just, again, kind of emphasizes a little bit the housing stock situation specific here in Niagara and Lincoln. And I think it validates some of the work that was done. You know, staff brought reports to council, I think it was it last year or the year before, on, you know, when we were working on, you know, how we're allocating growth and what growth looks like going into the future. I think a lot of that work, you know, you can see that it was a result of this data, that work was, you know, undertaken the way it was. You also look at other things that just, you know, guide how the housing, you know, how it's been the intake of new housing in terms of the amount of people residing in some of the newer dwelling units versus old. Just generally a lot of good information to guide, you know, how we plan for a more diversified housing stock moving forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm looking, councillors, to see if Ms. McKay is. She wouldn't be expecting us to ask questions. Oh, she's there. She's right off the mark. Thank you very much. Director McKay, did you have comments from the perspective of community services? You're on mute at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Sue. I think one of the stats that caught my attention was in relation to a question that was recently asked by Councillor Bernay at a meeting about the seniors. And, you know, when we read, and I apologize because I don't know what, I believe it's page 12, if I'm reading this correctly. In comparison to Canada, Ontario, Niagara has a disproportionate share of households maintained by residents over the age of 55. So when we look at certain programs, when we look at services that we make available, we need to be mindful of what's happening in our community and how our community is changing. So.
Very much. All right, councillors, are there any questions on the first item regarding the reserve water and wastewater treatment capacities? I see Councillor Reimer. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor Eason. Just a question possibly through to Director Graham, just with regards to this report. Do you know of any other municipalities in the region that have taken a proactive approach, I think like we have in the town of Lincoln, to the infiltration inflow issue? That's basically, you know, our treatment plants treating water that doesn't need to be treated. And I know we've been pretty active in Jordan Station and some of those issues there. And I'd be referring Director Graham not to replacing existing sewers, but disconnecting connections that are there currently. Do you know of any other municipalities that are sort of as active as we are? I'll use that term.
Director Graham.
Thank you for the question, Councillor, and through you, Madam Mayor. I know, so I&I reduction is gaining a lot of momentum for all municipalities to try and remove extra unwanted wet weather from the sewer system. But yeah, the town has been very proactive in trying to also look at, you know, where it's coming from on the private side. We've done a lot of work in the Jordan Station area, and council was very supportive of those pilot programs and looking at helping people disconnect sub pumps and downspouts and roof leaders from the sewer system. So I would say we've done a lot. We've also done a lot with new development. One thing that we were leading is once new sewers are installed, we are monitoring those sewers from the developers to make sure those sewers have been installed very tight, good workmanship. We're not going to assume leaky sewers, if you will, for the future, because we're committed to trying to reduce I&I. So we've done a lot of work in that area. As far as other municipalities, I think everyone is doing work with I&I to some form of degree, but those are definitely some highlights that we are doing as a town.
Thank you, Director Abe. Thank you, Mayor Eason.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I see no other questions on that item. Let's move to the highlights of the 2021 Census of Population. Any questions on that or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Mikulik.
Sorry, I was just a little slow on the button there for the previous one. Yeah, just quickly, like looking at the graphs for the water treatment, when it's Grimsby, Welland, they're approaching around the 60% range. Is there a percentage range where it triggers a need or a look to start looking at when or where an expansion or creation of a new water treatment facility or sewage treatment facility would be? Is it like 70, 80, 90? I'm assuming it wouldn't wait till the last minute.
That's true. Director Graham.
Yeah, thanks. Through you, Madam Mayor. So what sort of a first red flag is around the 80%. So when you're starting to approach that 80%, it really triggers a process where we need to start planning for expansion. Because you're right, we definitely don't want to be in a position where, you know, we have to do upgrades to plants and, you know, there's not enough time and the situation is, you know, in front of us right at that time. So we definitely flag it around the 80% where we need to start looking at that.
Okay, and I'm asking that question just because like right now we're relatively low at 40. I believe that's low. You know, with intensification, with growth, that could reach the 70, 80%. And then I'm just hoping that the region's planning on where they're going to build or create new fresh water or sewage treatment. So thank you.
think, Counselor, that the work that's being done right now, particularly in the Niagara Falls plant, and the upgrades in some of the other plants, I think there's almost none that they either been touched, the plan is in place, or the plan is in progress. So it's a pretty good response. So I think they're adhering to this to the criteria. Okay, I don't see any other questions. I have a motion moved by Councillor Mikulik and seconded by Councillor Reimer that council receive and file for information the following items of correspondence. Niagara Region dated June 9th, 2023 regarding the 2022 reserve water and wastewater treatment capacities. And the Niagara Region dated May 30th, 2023 regarding highlights from the 2021 census of population. Madam Clerk, would you please open the vote?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. The vote is now open.
Thank you, Councillor Foster.
Councillor Pachariva. Okay. I'll close that vote. And that carries, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. The motion carries and we move on to item number 12. And we're considering 12.1, the council minutes of May 29th, 2023. Do councilors have any questions? There being none, I have a motion by moved by Councillor Benchima, seconded by Councillor Murray, that council approve the minutes of the following meetings of council minutes of May 29th, 2023. Madam Clerk, would you please open the vote?
The vote is now open. And I will close that vote. And that carries, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. The motion is carried and we move on to item number 13, which is recommendations from standing committees. And we're now considering the following. The Committee of the Whole minutes of June the 5th, 2023. The Committee of the Whole minutes of June 19th, 2023. Do members of council have any questions? I have a motion moved by Councillor Brunet and seconded by Councillor Reimer that council approve the following recommendations from standing committee. Committee of the Whole minutes of June the 5th, 2023. Committee of the Whole minutes of June 19th, 2023. Madam Clerk, would you please open the vote?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And the vote is now open. And I will close that vote and that carries.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion carries. Item number 14 is notice of motion, and this evening we have no notice of motion. Item number 15 is the reports of municipal officers, and item 15.1 is the mayor's report. I have a few items that I'd like to review with you in terms of representation that I've made on behalf of the council since May 30th, actually. On May 30th, we had the flag raising for Pride Month and the proclamation was read at council. On May 31st, I met with several members of the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce and one of the professors from Niagara College to discuss gender equity and inclusion and how we could examine the way in which policy is developed at the town. I've had a discussion with Mr. CAO on this matter. I had a discussion later in the day with members of the Niagara Irrigation Group and the chair of planning at the region, Michelle Sergi, commissioner of planning. And Lincoln will be leading this delegation at AMO. So members all have more information for you about that. On the same day, we raised the flag to acknowledge National Accessibility Week. And we move on to June 15th, which was the beginning of a new kind of exciting event, I think, in the town, a community event called Catch the Ace that's being sponsored by the town of Lincoln and is being operated and initiated by the by Lincoln Lions. And this is a community fundraising event, and some of us have been there. Councillor Murray and Councillor Timmers and I were there the first time. I don't know how many of you have been going along, but as there's been some pretty big excitement in other communities with these Catch the Ace events, we know that it could bring some substantial money into the community. And so those people that have been identified to receive money are also coming out to draw the tickets, and it's every Thursday. And so I would encourage you to, if you can, be community minded and watch for the notices. It's at the Fleming Center. On June the 2nd, we had a very interesting experience at the Vineland Garden Hub, which is a project that is a private enterprise initiative along with the United Way, where a farm family has dedicated some of the space on their farm to a local garden. And many people are turning out as volunteers to do the work in terms of the planting, working up the land, actually doing the planting and also the weeding and everything that goes along with the harvest. So that's going to be quite interesting. The Town of Lincoln Council has also approved the demolition of a barn on the property, and there's going to be a new barn built, which will have many attributes related to agricultural education, specifically as it relates to creating gardens. On June the 30th, Councillor Brunet, Patriva, and myself attended the Mission Thrift Store 20th anniversary. And I know if Councillor Patriva were in the room tonight that he would have mentioned this earlier. And I'm surprised that Councillor Brunet didn't talk about it, because this is their old stomping ground. So it was a great event, and obviously some wonderful work being done on behalf of the entire community and certainly those that are in need. From June the 5th to the 8th, I attended the Great Lakes Cities Initiative in my capacity as the chair of the Commission on Shoreline Resilience. On June the 11th, I attended Pat and Ray Conkle's, Mayor Ray Conkle's 60th wedding anniversary. It couldn't have been slated any more closely to a garden party that I've ever seen. There must have been a couple of hundred people there, and it was a great afternoon. And the Lincoln Concert Band was there, and the Strong Women were there from the Jordan Station United Church singing, and it was just a great afternoon. On June 12th, I attended Dr. Leslie Riggs' convocation, or her installation at the spring convocation. I believe that she is the 7th president of Brock University. Sitting beside me on the podium was a gentleman I'd never met before. His name was Ian Bettis, and I discovered later that the gymnasium at Brock was named after him. On June the 30th, I attended with the CAO, the BIA quarterly meeting. And of course, Stephanie Hicks always has all kinds of exciting programming to tell us about. And she certainly reinforced the Big Bench project, which is up and coming, and the future plans for the Fling on King, which was attended last year by about 5,000 people. On June 14th, you've already heard a number of us attended the new winery at King and Victoria. June 15th, I was involved in a telephone conversation with representatives of Sturgeon County, Alberta, on value-added agriculture, and they were wondering how we had managed this from a legislative perspective, and they had many, many questions. And I thought it might be a good idea if they just came out here and had a look around and saw what had been accomplished over the last 8 years. And they may do that. The Business Achievement Awards were that night as well, sponsored by the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce, and Verhoof Electric were nominated this year. On June 17th, the Beamsville Scouts had their year-end barbecue, and it was a huge group. I think there were close to 80 people there, and the kids just have a wonderful time. The weather couldn't have been better. All the trees that they planted over a couple of years are doing really, really well. And I think they should be very proud of the initiatives that they've taken on and the work that they're doing. But it's a large group. Many middle teen groups, youth are in the group and very, very active. It's certainly great to see them as busy and active as they are. You've heard about the bus tour, the business tour to Provisions Food Company. I just wanted to add a bit more to that because they're actually starting to manufacture foods that come in jars, and they're pre-packaging biscuit mixes and that sort of thing. And you can buy all these things in the grocery store, but these are local recipes, they're local products, and you can go on their website and find those products there. And they shared with us some chocolate shortbread, and it was pretty darn good. So that'll be our endorsement on the cookies. On June 20th, I met with Mayor Jordan and Mayor Ganan to talk about shared opportunities. We had a very informal discussion, really fact-finding. Where do we stand on the issues? How comfortable are we moving forward? I think you know what my position is on this and the position of council as they passed a motion during the budget process. So we are going to be meeting again this Friday. And we're going to meet with Sam Oosterhoff, our MPP, the CAOs. I hope that all of them are coming. They have been invited as well. We're going to have a more serious discussion, and I'll keep you up to date on where that takes us. But we're not forgetting about this, and we'll make sure that insurance is on the list, Councillor Brunet. I also attended the tour of Durkin Systems. Unfortunately, I was not aware of this business, and I think that this is another good reason for economic development departments who are on top of who's who in terms of the business, the list of businesses in the community, can keep us tuned into changes that take place within the businesses. This is another international company that is producing, that is manufacturing a variety of materials that can be used to protect new housing. So there's certainly environmental issues here. They do some packaging for other companies, manufacturing and packaging for other companies. It's just an excellent, excellent business to have in our midst. And we're so pleased to have celebrated the opening of the new warehouse, and I'm sure it won't be long before it's filled to the rafters. Later that day, I attended McNally House. There was an expansion announcement made on funding. All of the mayors were there with Sam Oosterhoff. And we also heard about continuous support that will be that has been committed for the operating costs, benefits, et cetera, for the RN staff that work there, and a good amount of the money that's raised, or that is available now for the operations, has to be raised by volunteers. So I think they were quite relieved to hear of this new announcement, and I want to thank MPP Oosterhoff and the executive at McNally House and the board for their big push, their continuous push to have this important work supported. I think we would all agree that Vineland Research and Innovation Center is certainly one of the places that we look to when we're talking about a center of excellence for agriculture. We were there on June 22nd to celebrate the renovation of one of the older pieces of infrastructure on the property, where they now have a soil science lab. We were there in a greater group on another occasion and were able to see what it was that they had to offer. It's directly related to the quality of and longevity of trees that we're planting in our communities, but it goes way beyond that. The City of Toronto is also involved. It's very exciting to know that that the Lincoln community is recognized in these very significant initiatives. The same day, I mean, it's really hard to believe that we would have two major events like the grand opening of the Vineland Growers later that day. It was quite exciting. And I must say, we certainly had on both occasions strawberries. They're like little gems around, even though they're in every market now. Those first few days, everybody is just out there with their hands out trying to get the newest crop. On June 23rd, I was in St. Catharines. This was this past Saturday, and this was rather interesting. So I want to speak to you briefly about this. First of all, by the way, I went to Slovensky Dawn 2023 at Bled Hall. I don't know where Councillor Pachariba was. He tells me that he knew nothing about it. I'm sorry that I had no idea, because I knew you would have been there. I was very pleased to be invited. This is at Bled Hall on the Service Road. They have a fabulous facility there. I think, Mr. CAO, we should consider using it. It's quite beautiful inside. And they had a mass, and I did pretty well following along on my program. And I'd like to actually, I should note that not only was Councillor Pachariba not there, but also I got the same excuse from Councillor Mikulik, so I don't want to leave him out. You would have been most welcome for sure. So let me just tell you that this is something that happens every 4 years, where all of the Bled Slovenia or the Slovenian cultural clubs come together. And I don't know whether they've always done this, but they had greetings from the Embassy of the Republic of Slovenia out of Ottawa. They had greetings from the Slovenian representative for Canada at the government of the Republic of Slovenia. And they had greetings from the Honorary Council of Slovenia. It was a wonderful day. And I think that every day in Lincoln is wonderful when you can celebrate it with the people who came here post-World War II, raised their children, contributed to many businesses, a lot of agriculture, and the general well-being and nurturing of this community. It was a great afternoon. Unfortunately, I couldn't stay for the lunch. I think it's pretty tough to sit through a mass and have all that food being cooked in the background. It was pretty hard for people. Anyway, it was a great day, and I want to thank the organizers for inviting me. And then I went immediately to St. Catharines to the Community Health Center that's being operated by Quest Community Health. And I want councillors to talk to you about this because I learned a few things while I was there. I spoke to the Niagara chapter of the Native Women. This is an incorporated organization. They've been around for about 40 years. They operate out of Fort Erie. This announcement that was being made was regarding the primary healthcare services that Quest was offering it specifically for an Indigenous community clinic. And I went because I wanted to see and to hear what was going into this clinic, what the relationship might be to a health hub in Lincoln. And I wanted to know, just generally speaking, who was the population that they were servicing. Let me tell you, councillors, you know, we become quite insular in staying within our own community. And it's just not possible for us to be everywhere. But I got a real eye opener. It was quite humbling to see who all the people were, not just Indigenous people, but a very large number of people in the neighborhood that exists around Quest Healthcare. And people were there just for the food and just for the fellowship. But I learned a great deal about what kind of clinics operate out of there. They provide primary health care to individuals residing in St. Catharines who are not registered with any other primary care provider. But they also cover all the services for the migrant agricultural workers all over Niagara, which really interested me, and it would interest you as well. They service sexually and gender diverse populations. They serve at-risk children, youth, and families. And as far as the Indigenous population is concerned, they ensure that the Indigenous community can come in without any reservations around gender, around sexual orientation, and that there is no racial bias. And so I really felt that it was certainly worth going for the education. It was certainly worth going to see where the possibilities are. What I learned about the work of the Niagara Native women in regard to the sex trade just made my heart turn cold. It's right around the corner from us. It's not something we can ignore. It's a real concern. And so I want to thank the organizers for inviting me, and I'm happy to have shared some good news and some very happy news, because I think having these services available is extremely important to us. Yesterday, of course, was Brunch by the Lake. You've heard about that. It was extremely successful, and I want to thank everyone that was involved in it. And so that was a pretty busy month, and that didn't even take into account the meetings that we all attended. So thank you all very much, and we'll now move on. I have a motion moved by Councillor Timmers and seconded by Councillor Mikulik. The council receive and file as information the following mayor's report. Madam Clerk, would you please open the vote?
Thank you, Mayor Easton, and the vote is now open. I will close that.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion is carried. We move to item number 16 to consider confidential matters. We have no confidential matters this evening. Item 17 is the motion to approve bylaws, and we have 11 bylaws for consideration. And there were explanations provided, and I'll ask now if members have any questions. Just tell me which one you're looking at. Councillor Majima?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't have a question, but I just noticed that I do need to declare, if we could please lift bylaw number, sorry, struggling a little bit. The one regarding it. So item 1710 on the agenda, bylaw 2023-43 to be voted on separately, because I'll have to declare a conflict and leave the room.
So that's 2023-43.
Yes, please.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can we deal with that one right now? Councillor Majima leaves.
Yes, we can.
All right, Councillor Mikulik, were you going to ask a question on that one? Okay, could I ask you just to stand down for a moment? Okay. Councillors, at the moment, we're going to deal with item 2023-43, a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 2022-50 as amended of the town of Lincoln, Prudham's Landing. Are there any questions to the bylaw?
Madam Mayor, I'm seeing no hands raised, but I do need a mover and a seconder to pass this. And I see Counselor Reimer and
Counselor-
Counselor Brunei.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right,
And I'll put that to the vote, Madam Mayor.
please go ahead.
Thank you. And the vote is now open. And I will close that vote. And that carries. Thank you.
Thank you. That motion is carried. We'll move on then. Thank you very much, Councillor Renjima. We'll move on then to the balance of the bylaws. Are there any questions? Please go ahead, Councillor Mikulik.
Thank you very much, Mayor Easton. I just was wondering if we could lift 17.1, 17.3, and 17.2.
Okay, what I don't have.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, what is the bylaw number?
The bylaw numbers would be 2023-34,
Okay,
2023-35, and 36.
2023-36. Okay,
Those three.
go ahead, Councillor.
Okay, so for the 17.1 with regards to the debt level, is our director or is our acting director of finance going to comment or speak to that?
Did you have a specific question?
I do, but I was going to wait to hear from.
If she has anything further to add to it. All right, hello, Charlotte, would you like to speak to the bylaw, please?
Yes, through you, Mayor, to the councillor. Basically, this bylaw is just routine. So it is to authorize the application to Infrastructure Ontario for debentures for amounts that have previously been approved by council under the capital budgets.
Thank you very much. Is there anything that you would, any response that you have, Councillor Mikulik?
The question I have through you to Charlotte is, when making these applications or submitting these applications, is there a time period for which that application is valid for and has to be drawn upon?
Through you, Mayor, to the councillor. Typically speaking, we have 5 years to draw those finances. When we apply for construction financing, we do have to do a draw within a year, but there's not really a restriction on the amount. So as long as we have some design costs or something like that we need to draw on, then that would meet the requirement.
Follow up to that question. So the payments are only made on the amount borrowed at that time for the costs incurred.
Through you, Mayor, to the councillor, yes, for construction loans. So there are 2 types of applications that we do. One type is for projects where we had sufficient cash in order to float the cost of the construction and then debenture after the project is completed. So for those ones, we will debenture and then immediately start incurring the principal and interest payments. But the vast majority of the ones in this application are for construction financing. And so we only pay interest on the amounts that we withdraw.
Okay, thank you very much. And then, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Councillor Brunei, your question is on this matter?
It's with regards to 2034, yeah.
Yes.
So I did reach out to the acting director of finance and to the CEO earlier today, asking a few questions about this. I'm just still confused as to and I understand, I'm not naive to the fact that construction projects there's payments that flow throughout the project from start to finish. I'm very well aware of that. But when I look at a project like Rittenhouse Road, I'm trying to understand, and I know I received a response, but maybe I'm just, I'm not following it. So we put out a loan for Rittenhouse Road for $4.9 million. You know, the project moves along swimmingly. Basically, for all intents and purposes, the project is pretty well finished with regards to, with the exception of maybe, you know, some deficiencies in top asphalt. But we're now pulling a loan for $1.8 million. I'm just struggling to understand why it's still so high in relationship to the phase of the project that's, you know, really for all intents and purposes, 95% complete. I'm just trying to understand that.
Okay, Charlotte, when you were asked the question earlier today, were you, was it possible for you to prepare further information that you can present to us this evening, or do you need time to do that?
Through you, Mayor, the amount that's being debentured for that project, I have verified against the Public Works report that came forward in 2021 and outlined the financial implications of the tender that was awarded. And so the amount that's being debentured is the full amount that was approved. It's not that there was previous amounts. This is the total for that project.
Counselor?
So the chart that was in the report, there was a left side of the chart and a right side of the chart. And so the 4.9 and the 1.8, what can someone explain what those represent then? The left side of the chart and the right side of the chart, specific to Rittenhouse?
You're referring to all the sources of revenue that were going to support that project. Is that what you're referring to, Counselor?
I'm just referring to the chart that was put in this report with regards to the OLIC funding that I thought was relevant. So
Okay.
that's why I'm asking the question, because I must be missing something.
Through you, Mayor, to the counselor. So you're referring to the schedule to the bylaw? Is that what you mean by the left side and the right side? So the schedule to the bylaw has a cost of 4.95 million. And the report that went forward to Public Works had a cost of approximately 4.6 million in total. So is that what you're referring to? The difference in? Yeah, I haven't looked into that. The part that I verified was that the approval by council was the long-term borrowing of 1.833 million. So I'd have to look into it. It's possible that, yeah. So it's possible that there were prior approved budget amounts. Sometimes what happens is that the design is approved at a certain phase and then the construction at the next phase, but I would have to verify that for you.
All right, well, let's just quickly. Mr. CAO is going to clarify. And then I may go to Mr. Graham if it's necessary. Go ahead, Mr. CAO.
Sure, through you, Madam Mayor, and maybe I'll give a little bit of time for Director Graham to chime in, but looking at the chart, and I'll see if I can try to understand the councilor's question. The left-hand side of the chart shows the total estimated project cost, and the right-hand side of the chart shows the amount we're going to debenture. We're here in this term, in terms of this project, because it isn't one where we're pulling and using construction financing. And so like we've done with all projects, at the end of the project is when we issue the debenture. And so I think that's why that one's before you. At least that's how I read it. So if staff have anything to add further to that, they can add, but that's how I read what's in front of council right now. To the councilor's question as to that project's been done for all intents and purposes. And so why is it taking this long to do the debenturing? I think that's just a matter of where we're at in the process. And I know we're talking to IO on a fairly regular basis. So again, we can follow up with the councilor so I can understand maybe in more detail the concern, but the way I read the chart is estimated project cost. and the pull on long-term borrowing in the right-hand column.
All right, well, let's just quickly. Mr. CAO is going to clarify. And then I may go to Mr. Graham if it's necessary. Go ahead, Mr. CAO.
Sure, through you, Madam Mayor, and maybe I'll give a little bit of time for Director Graham to chime in, but looking at the chart, there's possible that
And that's fine, Madam Mayor. I don't want to hijack the meeting. I'm just trying to understand the process and the flow and why we're pulling a debenture at this point in time. If that's standard, I guess it's standard, but you know, the fact that it's, you know, 2.5 years after the project started, I'm just surprised, but we can go offline. Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I would just add, Counselor, that I think the first one that I ever saw here that when it was our first term as mayor, it was almost 1.5 years before we did, it may have been 2 years before we debentured the Fleming Center. And some of it has to do with the timing at the region as well.
For you, Mayor, just to add to that, typically we go through this project once per year with the region. So in speaking with the Director of Public Works, I understand this project reached substantial completion last year, and it's after the point of substantial completion that we debenture. So it's likely that just from the timing of that completion until the application of debentures with the region, it's happening this year. So it is very typical in my experience in municipalities that the debenture comes the year following the year that it's completed.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Mikulik, your question, is it on this matter?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you to Charlotte. I don't want to beat this up either. But with regards to budgeting, and it's a very difficult thing to do, to predict costs or to come up with numbers to present to council for consideration at the time of the budget. But what does a municipality do when you're in shifting times, or, you know, financially challenging times where interest rates are fluid, construction costs are fluid, and the original amount that was estimated to be borrowed could be fluid? How do we budget for that? Assuming that, you know, we approve this sort of borrowing, and then the tenders come in higher than expected, and we're committed to borrowing X amount of dollars. Like, do we go and try to borrow more, or how do we deal with those circumstances? Additional unexpected costs.
For you, Mayor, to the councillor, I think how each municipality deals with it may be different. And I think it's a determination of council. So if a project comes in higher than budget, higher than we anticipated, then we would look at what our available funding sources are. If we have money in reserves, we may choose to pull it from reserves. And if we don't, then we may look at taking out additional debt. So I think what we try to do is to forecast as reliably as we can, and to build somewhat of a buffer into the forecast in terms of our interest rates and our expected timing. And then we just have to react if there is something unanticipated that comes up, which, you know, the situation that's happening in recent months and in the last couple of years with construction prices and interest rates is not unique to Lincoln, but it is something that each municipality is dealing with.
Thank you very much.
Mr. CAO, it's my recollection that we have had these situations and that you're the front person that's dealt with the circumstances around the RFP. Do you have anything to add to this?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I mean, I think Charlotte probably encapsulated it well. I think we've had numerous instances in the past, and we do our best to have estimates that incorporate, you know, whatever sort of buffers are there. I can recall on numerous occasions where council doesn't want us to carry buffers, and as a result, we try to budget very, very tightly. And sometimes we come in right on budget, or in terms of what those tenders come in, and other times they're over. There are numerous times council's asked us to take a pause. I can think of a number of examples. Councillor Brunet, you know, was one of them that led the charge on a project where we did take a pause, where you've challenged us to go out, where you've challenged us to go talk to the particular proponent, where you've challenged us to look at, can we find monies in other places? So I think you know, where it's much more volatile probably than it was in the past. I know a lot of the consultants we're speaking to are seeing projects come in anywhere between 50 to 150% higher than anticipated. Those aren't things we can actually budget for. I'm not going to come to you with a budget item that in 2021 was X million, and now it's 2 times X million 2 years later, although that is what some municipalities are seeing. And so I think we need to look at each one to the best of our abilities and make decisions in real time. And I think when we talked about long-term borrowing, when we talked about the work of the ad hoc committee, that was one of the things that we said to you. We need to look at each of these projects individually and make real-time, real-life, immediate decisions at that particular point in time. I think we could do our best and try to give you estimates, but I can't tell you that 6 months from now or 6 months in the past, what those estimates are actually apply right now. So I think some of it is really, I wish I had a crystal ball. I think when we were going back and forth on email, Counselor, I said that to you. I don't in this particular case. And so again, we're going to try to make sure every I and T are dotted and crossed, and make sure that each of the projects that we're tendering and that we're seeking requests for proposals on are done, I think, to the best of our collective abilities. But something we're all experiencing across this province, I would suggest probably across this country, in terms of being able to estimate properly. So there is some volatility, and those are the things we deal with in time. There's nothing I can give you in terms of advice right now that would tell you this is how to avoid that, other than coming in astronomically high on projects. But that is also not prudent and not appropriate. So we're going to try our best, and I think we make real-time decisions when budgets and tenders come in.
Thank you very much, Mr. CAO. There's a couple of things about this report, the actual bylaw. It has a lot of detail. My recollection regarding debenturing is that it's pretty, what is that expression? It's a boilerplate. And it's the same process. I didn't see anything in here that I hadn't heard before, except for item number 9, when the Ontario Infrastructure and Lands Corporation is inviting Ontario municipalities desirous of obtaining temporary and long-term debt financing to do that, that if it's incurred on or after the year that is 5 years prior to the year of an application. I was looking for some clarity on that, because I'm reading from this that we need to have a pretty good idea of what our future commitments are going to be. So I'm looking, Mr. CAO, for an explanation from you or one of the staff as you see fit on item number 9.
Through you, Madam Mayor. So I don't have item 9 in front of me at the moment, but, you know, I think as it relates to, you know, what you're suggesting, you know, and I've experienced this with other municipalities, we can't, you know, I think have a capital plan, work towards that capital plan, approve projects and capital works, and then not undertake to get those done. And I can tell you this morning, we were talking with another municipality where that has occurred. A lot of the larger municipalities that are facing some infrastructure deficits, that are facing a shortage of staff, find themselves in this situation. So I think that general provision by OILC is really meant, I think, to capture if we take on a project, if we look to fund that project, that project does need to be done within that appropriate time horizon.
The councillors that have asked questions, Councillor Renee, Councillor Mikulik, any other councillors, would you be looking for staff to provide more orientation on this? I think it's a good opportunity, if that is your wish, for us to request more information. Nothing? Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions of any of the other bylaws as they've been presented? Councillor Renee.
So Madam Mayor, just with regards to 17.3, which is 2023-36, that
Okay.
Councillor Michalak asked to be pulled for discussion. I just want to make sure through you to the CAO that based on our discussions, when the motion was brought forward and we specifically asked something that might not be commonplace, but that we put in those provisions, and specifically number E, which was to report back to during the site plan on the entrance location on Mountain Street on this application, that there's nothing we're doing tonight in approving this bylaw that is going to jeopardize what we brought back in that motion in terms of what normally might not occur, but is something that we have directed back to staff. I just want to clarify that.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the counselor, you're absolutely correct, Counselor. That approving this evening does not remove the holding provision that we put in place, and that holding provision as it relates to the items that were discussed that evening, that being generally amenity space, as well as some of the other items that were directed at that time in terms of where the entrance was located. Those and that holding provision will not be lifted until we come before council. So you are correct, Counselor. This doesn't approve anything related to those items or limit the ability to come back on that H provision.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Counselor. Counselor Michalak, you had identified 3 items. Were the other 2 items that you identified? Are you satisfied, Counselor?
Councillor Brunei asked the exact question I was going to ask,
Okay.
but then I do have another question with regards to 17.2.
Okay, and which number is that? Which bylaw number is that? Is that 35?
The United Mennonite Home.
The United Mennonite Home?
Yeah, 2023-35.
All right, go ahead, Counselor.
I just, with regards to this bylaw, I think it's fantastic that, we're creating almost 60 affordable housing units for seniors in Vineland. The question I have is, when we are in the design phase, when we're in the planning stages, some of the concerns from a traffic safety perspective in terms of active transportation and that sort of thing, or along Menno or along 23rd Street, not being sure what's going to happen today. Are we looking at this tomorrow?
Are we looking at it when?
The active transportation piece and the traffic safety and those sorts of issues as part of the project.
Mr. Bruder.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to the counselor. Absolutely, Counselor. I know there's been some conversations. I've had a few myself with staff about active transportation in the area. Definitely, resulted in conversations. We would have had them anyway, but conversations with our public works colleagues in terms of what this looks like both now during the construction of the development and then long-term as well. As we look at, in this case, Menno and 23rd as a whole, making sure we've got those appropriate active transportation linkages where we need them. Right now, along Menno, there is a sidewalk along the south side. I know there's been some conversations or concerns with residents, maybe it should be along the north. Usually with a local residential street like that, you would only have the sidewalk on one side, but I've been talking with Director Graham about this, and, there is a future urbanization on Menno that will occur. Definitely something we're going to be revisiting at that time as well. So definitely, not the end of the conversation by any means, just in terms of looking at this development specifically, though, since they have a sidewalk loop for their residents on the private side. And since we have that sidewalk on the south side, and since there's also going to be sidewalk on 23rd for the time being, that was considered sufficient. But again, looking to revisit again when we look at Menno in further detail.
And I'm happy for you to, I'm happy to hear that. I think it's very important. We talk about active transportation. We talk about being able to walk safely to these sorts of places, and we have to take a look at who's living at these sorts of places and make sure it's as safe as possible. at these stages of the planning, nothing worse than hearing after the fact that, you know, we should have thought about that before, we can't do that now. I want to make, you know, and not everything can be done at once. There's only so much money that the town has to spend or to provide for infrastructure, but so long as we're planning for it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Counselor. Thank you, Mr. Bruder. I see no further questions. I have a motion moved by Counselor Pachiriva, seconded by Counselor Timmers. Counselor Mikulik?
Just asking if we could vote on 17.1 separately.
Tell me, is that the OILC?
Yeah.
We need a mover and a seconder, Madam Mayor.
We'll need a mover and a seconder. Counselor Mary, would you move that? Counselor Timmers, will you second it? Okay.
Okay. I will
All
put
right,
it
I
up.
have a motion moved by Counselor Murray, seconded by Counselor Timmers, that leave be given to introduce bylaw number 2023-34, being a bylaw to authorize the submission of an application to Ontario Infrastructure and Land Corporation for financing certain ongoing capital works of the Corporation of the Town of Lincoln, to authorize temporary borrowing from OILC to meet expenditures in connection with such capital works, and to authorize long-term borrowing for such capital works through the issue of debentures by the Regional Municipality of Niagara, the Upper Tier Municipality, to OILC.
Okay.
Madam Clerk, could you please open the vote?
The vote is now open. And I'll close that vote. And that carries 7-1. Okay.
I have a motion moved by Counselor Pachiriva, seconded by Counselor Timmers.
Yes.
That leave be given to approve the following bylaws. Bylaw number 2023-35, a bylaw to authorize the execution of a site plan agreement between the Corporation of the Town of Lincoln, United Mennonite Home for the Aged, together with any and all mortgagees that may be on title at the point of registration of the agreement. Bylaw number 2023-36, a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw number 2022-50 as amended of the Town of Lincoln 212410002 Ontario Inc. Bylaw 2023-37, a bylaw to adopt amendment number 14 to the official plan of the Town of Lincoln. Bylaw 2023-38, bylaw to amend bylaw number 89-2000, 89-28, being a bylaw regulating traffic and parking on local municipal roads. Bylaw 23-39, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 89-2000, 89-28, being a bylaw regulating traffic and parking on local municipal roads. Bylaw 2023-40, bylaw to amend bylaw number 89-2000, 89-28, being a bylaw regulating traffic and parking on local municipal roads. Bylaw 2023-41, bylaw to authorize the purchase of property along East Avenue to provide legal access to 4299 East Avenue and 4305 East Avenue. Bylaw 2023-42, a bylaw to declare part lot 160, CP Plan 3, Clinton, as in R0953304, except Part 1 and 2, 30 R2208, R0320682, and R 259 as part of the common and public highway system under the jurisdiction of the town of Lincoln as part of East Avenue. Bylaw 2023-44, a bylaw to adopt Amendment 15 to the official plan of the town of Lincoln. Madam Clerk, would you please open the vote?
And the vote is now open, Madam Mayor. And I will close that vote. And that carries.
The motion is carried. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Item number 18 is a motion to confirm proceedings of the council meeting. We will now confirm the procedures of the council meeting through a motion moved by Councillor Mikulik and seconded by Councillor Brunei, that leave be given to introduce bylaw number 2023-45, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held Monday, June 26, 2023, being read a first, second, and third time. That bylaw number 2023-45 be enacted and passed, and that the mayor and clerk sign and seal the said bylaw. Madam Clerk, would you please open the vote?
That's vote open. Close that. And that carries.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion is carried. Before we motion, councillors, to adjourn the meeting, do members have any comments? There being none, I have a motion moved by Councillor Murray and seconded by Councillor Reimer. The council meeting on June 26th be adjourned at 2016 hours. Madam Clerk, would you please open the vote?
The vote is open. And I will close that vote. And that carries, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. The motion is carried. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Thank you to the staff who have supported us this evening, and thank you, councils, for your participation.